Hello and welcome to the fourth installment of this AI for Business livestream series from ThoughtBot. My name is Ferdia. I'm a senior product designer here at ThoughtBot, and I'm going to be taking you through this series. We've got about 5 weeks or so remaining in it. This series is a little bit different to our other AI in Focus series with Chad that you might have seen on our YouTube channels or on LinkedIn. For these streams, we're trying to keep it kind of light. Okay, so there's not going to be any really heavy technical definitions or anything like that. We're also going to be trying to keep each stream fairly short, so to around kind of 20 to 30 minutes. So it'll be kind of, nice and short each week. Fair warning with this one, this is probably one of the meatier topics we're going to be covering. So this one might be closer to 40, but I'll do my best to try to keep it brief and on time. Most weeks I'm joined by some of my amazing colleagues, but this week it's just going to be me. So I'm sorry if you have to listen to my soliloquy, but do feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye there in case anyone wants to know more about any topic. Cool. Let's dive in. Just to give you an overview of basically where we are in this series. This is the fourth stream, as I mentioned previously. In previous streams, we talked about the history of AI, and we talked about kind of how to harness that. And then as part of kind of harnessing AI, we looked at sort of the 3 areas that AI can be really beneficial in right now. So last week we covered automation. This week we're going to be tackling cognitive insights, and then next week we'll be looking at cognitive engagement. Those are kind of the three areas of interest. If you haven't watched those previous streams, the recordings are on YouTube, and I'd recommend watching them back because this one will make a lot more sense having seen the previous ones, but you might still find value from tuning into this one. And then later on in the series, we are going to be looking at some of the challenges you might face when you're trying to incorporate AI either into your product or into your business, and how you might overcome them. Okay, so that's all still to come. We're aiming to keep the cadence here at about 1 stream per week, but if you miss any, or if you miss any of them live, again, they'll all be available on YouTube. They're all linked together. We've got a playlist there on the ThoughtBot YouTube, so you can check them out there. Finally, just before we dive into today, and we kind of make this disclaimer at the start of each stream, and when I'm saying AI for the purposes of this streaming series, we're just using it as a kind of an umbrella term. It's a bit of a catch-all. It's a bit of a loose definition. I know that, but basically it helps us stay focused on the outcomes rather than kind of the technical minutiae or the technicalities of it. And that just kind of keeps things simple. And that's the purpose of this series. We're not looking at this from a technical perspective. We're looking at it from a business perspective, strategy perspective, product perspective. So just to keep that in mind, it's a loose definition. So we'll try not to get bogged down in that if possible. Okay, so as I said, last week we looked at AI and automation, and this week we're going to be looking at cognitive insights. Okay, so yeah, automation last week, and as I said, number 2 of the 3 things we looked at is going to be cognitive insight. So let's just say, imagine you're running a business and you've got a load of data, more data maybe than you know what to do with, and you know there are insights buried in there somewhere, and you know there's value in that, but finding them is a real challenge. And that is basically where cognitive insight can help. So cognitive insight is basically the ability of AI systems to analyze vast amounts of data and then to recognize patterns and to kind of generate some of these insights. Okay. So you can spot patterns that would either be invisible to the human eye, or maybe that would take humans a really long time to piece together. So things that are quite complex, it can do these things really, really quickly. So you can kind of connect those dots that might seem unrelated to kind of spot those patterns. And then these systems can then kind of make informed predictions based on that data. So they can kind of make, I guess, really good, fairly accurate predictions of potential future outcomes, and based on the historical stuff that it's looked at. And then finally, probably the really cool thing here is that a lot of these systems don't just kind of show you the data, and they actually recommend actions based on that. Okay, so that's kind of where it can be really, really powerful. And then, as we said in all of the previous streams, if it's kind of an AI powered system, it can get smarter over time. Okay, so it can learn from new information and new outcomes, and it can kind of refine itself and improve the insights and improve the suggested actions that you're going to get in future suggestions, basically. So again, you're going to get a lot of, like, with this stuff, you'll probably hear a lot of buzzwords related to cognitive insight. You'll hear machine learning, you'll hear deep learning, maybe natural language processing to kind of provide those predictive analytics. You'll hear a lot of that good stuff, and that is all great. But for us, the key takeaway here, from a business or a product or a strategy perspective, is what we can do with this. Okay, so the advantages of cognitive insight are massive in terms of strategic decision making. Okay, so we can really aid your strategic decision making, and that's pretty powerful. Okay, so let's look at an example just to see where this could apply, and we're going to revisit our Thought Burgers example. And for those of you who watched the previous stream, you'll know what this is. And for those who are new, this is ThoughtBot's delectable side business. It's an entirely fictitious restaurant chain, and we make the tastiest and most thought-provoking burgers. And yeah, this fictitious restaurant chain has launched in London, doing really well across the UK, and it's spreading to Ireland and across Europe. And we've now got multiple branches open, so it's all going well. Everything's going great. But Thought Burgers now has a bit of a problem. Okay, and the problem that we're facing is that due to kind of limited kitchen capacity and rush hour traffic, it means that sometimes during these hours we are taking too long to deliver burgers to our customers. So it's taking like 50 minutes to get our burgers to customers, and that's obviously too long. So we don't want customers to have to wait for that long. So our goal, from kind of looking at how we might bring in AI into the process to help us, is to reduce this rush hour. Okay, so we want to reduce that wait time by about 30%, and then we set our metric for that. So we have a way to measure it. Okay, and again, you'll have seen this in previous streams, but this is just to make sure that all our future efforts are anchored in adding value to the customer. It's all tied back to that. If you want to have a successful rollout of AI for your product or business, you have to be delivering customer value. Don't just bring it in just because it's a kind of a shiny new tool. Okay. So then after that, once we've kind of anchored everything in that problem and the goal we want to solve, the next step is to basically look at your process. And again, this is a really simplified version of what a restaurant kind of delivery process might look like. We've just got kind of 8 simple steps. And then we look at the 3 areas that AI is good at. So again, automation, which we looked at last week, cognitive insight, which we'll be looking at this week, and cognitive engagement, which we'll be looking at next week. And for this week, we're going to try to see if we can align basically cognitive insight with steps in a process in such a way that it'll help us achieve our goal of reducing those delivery times during rush hour. Okay. So for our purposes, and again, this is a pretty rudimentary example, but it could probably help us out with step 2 and 4 here. These are related to driver scheduling, and with step 6 here, where it's kind of related to order triaging, so around like assigning orders to particular branches. So for steps 2 and 4, say to begin with, if we use data like say order volume and location, we could maybe train a model to predict demand and optimize driver schedules better than a human could in that scenario. You know, it can kind of take those insights into account. And the model could then maybe, particularly in relation to step 4 here, the model could also be trained to maybe kind of cluster and identify patterns in driver illness that like a human wouldn't probably be able to spot. And Sammy and I spoke about this in a previous stream, but you know, maybe drivers with kids, when the kids go back to school in September, they often bring colds home with them. And so, you know, drivers with kids of that age group tend to be a bit more sick in September. So you need to either staff up or kind of move those schedules around. So those kind of insights could be valuable. Ultimately, that will result in a more kind of efficient and a more effective driver schedule, which could reduce delivery times during peak hours, like having the optimal number of drivers there and available. So again, it's helping us get towards our goal. And if we were to look at step 6, this is probably maybe even a more powerful case for it. It's, as I said, it's basically order triaging here. So how we're picking what branch an order gets sent to. So again, if we take like data about order volumes, locations, kitchen capacity, maybe we look at rejection rates, you know, from particular kitchens that they're declining orders because they're too busy or something. Maybe we take driver locations as well, so where the drivers are in real time. And if we take kind of all that data and throw cognitive insights into that mix, we could definitely improve or kind of optimize the triaging of orders between different branches. So like, let's say initially for Thought Burgers, our default behavior might be to assign a delivery to the nearest branch geographically. Just, it's the easiest thing to do. But cognitive insight then might spot patterns that would allow us to consider kind of alternative examples, I guess, or alternative approaches. So let's just say, like, for example, on this map here, our default behavior might have been to send an order to this geographical branch, the one on the left, because it's closest to the customer. But maybe this branch up here, kind of near the A10, it's slightly further away from the customer, yes, but maybe it has the kitchen capacity and the stock and the drivers available to make the delivery, and maybe it has like favorable traffic conditions too, you know, coming into town rather than out of town. So we send the order to this branch, which could result in the burger basically reaching the hands of the customer more quickly than if it was shipped from the nearest geographical one. That's just if the cognitive insights, you know, or if the data shows that will be the case. And we can also be doing this on the fly. So some orders might go to this branch, some orders might actually go to the more geographical one. So, you know, the system is flexible in that way. And I guess if we were to layer onto that even more, we could probably predict, you know, if you were doing this over a span of time, you could probably predict geographical demand, and that would then help our branches become even more prepared. So having the drivers in place, having the stock in place, you know, and that would give us more triaging options, so we could be even more efficient, right? So as I said, it's a fairly basic example, but if we think about the outcomes of what these kind of changes would mean, basically these data-driven decisions would improve the operating efficiency of the Thought Burgers branches. We could probably reduce maybe rejections from kitchens, so no one kitchen is getting too many orders, and yeah, all that stuff kind of comes together to reduce the delivery times, which is our goal, ultimately at the end of the day. And again, we follow the same process we spoke about in our second stream of this series, which is start with the problem, identify the goal, identify your success metrics, look at your process, see where AI aligns with different steps in your process. And that's how you can kind of make those efficiency gains. Okay. Now, there are obviously other use cases for cognitive insights. So I'll just run through a few of these quickly here as well. First up, we have sentiment analysis. So you can see here on the right-hand side, traditional sentiment analysis might flag a review like this one where it says the wait time was ridiculously long, but the momos are absolutely sick. Traditional sentiment analysis might flag that as kind of negative because it's got the words ridiculously long and it's got the word sick in it. Cognitive kind of AI, however, is better able to recognize, I suppose, the mixed sentiment around the wait time versus how good the food is, and they can kind of weigh that feedback better or weigh it accordingly, kind of in a more balanced way. It can also probably understand the context a little bit better, or like the nuance or the kind of intent, which again traditional sentiment analysis would struggle with. So for that first one, it might pick up that like sick in this case is a compliment rather than something negative. It'd be like maybe radical in the US, or I know savage was a word in Ireland that was used very popular for a while. So those kind of things that you might think would be negative maybe, but in context, those kind of colloquialisms can actually mean something quite different. So AI kind of can help, I suppose, pick up on that kind of thing and better weigh the feedback then. It can also kind of detect sarcasm, which is kind of on this tweet here at the bottom about this meat-free burger, and it just has kind of nothing in it. So this is obviously a sarcastic tweet, but it's not going to pick up as like, best meat-free burger ever, that it's a good thing. The caveat, obviously, with all sentiment analysis done on social media is that it does tend to skew either to be very positive or negative. But yeah, cognitive insights can basically help balance that as best you're going to get it, really. Another good use of cognitive insights is for combating churn. Okay, and personally, I think this one's a really powerful one, because what you can do here is you can basically kind of identify at-risk customers before they leave. So you can look basically at, say, the purchase history, maybe their engagement patterns, and maybe their support interactions. If they're struggling to complete tasks or something. So like you can kind of pick up these early warning signs that, again, a human might miss. Maybe declining usage would be in there as well. And a human might miss those things in isolation, but kind of a cognitive insight powered system would be able to pick up on those things much better. And again, which we talked about earlier, the best part is that it won't just show you that data, it won't just flag the risk, and it can maybe predict why the customer is going to leave, first of all, but then suggest a personalized kind of action to re-engage them. So like, that could be like a special offer, or support outreach if they've kind of been struggling to complete a lot of tasks on your site or on your product, so that you can proactively reach out, and say, oh, we saw that you're struggling with this thing. Is there anything we can do to help? Or like, another example here would be like, let's say Netflix, which is obviously a subscription service, and they might spot that, or they might use cognitive insights to identify that actually people in a certain geographical region and maybe in a certain age demographic or something are leaving the subscription after like 22 months. Okay. And then with that info, Netflix can then send out maybe special offers after 20 months to those kind of in the danger zone folks, to try to entice them to stay basically before they leave. So basically, you're allowing basically a business to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to dealing with their customers. And I think that's really powerful. So it's a good one. Predictive maintenance is another one. It's a bit similar to combating churn, but kind of rather than customers, I guess, you're kind of looking at machinery or kind of hardware. So again, cognitive insight can detect these really subtle patterns in sensor data, or maybe equipment logs, or historical failures, and that a human might overlook, and can kind of link those dots together, connect those dots that we might miss. Most maintenance, I think, I'm not in manufacturing, but a lot of maintenance tends to be done on kind of fixed schedules, or when something goes wrong. So obviously something breaks, you're going to fix it, or there's kind of, every 6 months or every 3 months or whatever it is, machines get checked. But if you have kind of cognitive insights running here in the background, you can continuously analyze kind of in real time these sort of performance metrics around your machinery or your hardware. So they can predict basically when a machine is likely to fail before it actually does. And obviously that means then you're going to have fewer sort of breakdowns, you're going to have less machine downtime, which increases manufacturing, all those kind of benefits, and lower maintenance costs probably as well. So again, it's similar to combating churn in that a business can now move from being reactive to kind of proactive about their maintenance. Another one is that it can be used to kind of spot trends. And so this would be like a big use case, say, for the fashion industry, if that's applicable to your business, because obviously trends are so important there. Cognitive insight can basically help fashion brands, I guess, spot new trends, maybe in different regions or in different demographics before they go mainstream, because it can analyze all that data through social media or online searches, or maybe like influencer activity, maybe even real-time sales data if they have access to it. So you can kind of pull in a lot of this kind of sort of related data, but from a lot of different sources, and make a good judgment call on that. So like for a fashion company, it would help, I suppose, in two ways really. The first way would probably be that it reduces overstocking of items that won't sell, because like, okay, this is a declining trend, I'm going to buy less of this type of t-shirt or whatever it might be. So yeah, you're not buying things that you're then going to have to sell at discounted prices to the same degree. You're not overstocking on certain things. But it can also then mean for fashion designers that they can actually create something completely new. So they can create completely new designs to cater kind of to future demand rather than the demands of today. And it's less about kind of taking a pot shot and what you think might happen, because you've got this data to kind of back it up. These are trends, the way the market is moving. And I think that's, as a designer in any industry, I think that's pretty exciting, that you could get insights into where the market's going now, before it actually goes there, and design something new that's going to meet that demand. Although I'm not sure I would ever kind of follow in this fashion footsteps. I don't think you get away with wearing that around Dublin. But yeah, it's another powerful use case for cognitive insights. And then a final example would be around supply chain management. So again, in previous streams, we've looked at Amazon and how they use a lot of AI to kind of power their systems. In this case, they might be analyzing like obviously customer demand. They might be analyzing their stocking in warehouses. They might also look at weather patterns. If they're flying things or sending things around the world on ships, obviously weather would have a big impact on disruptions and stuff there. So in this case, basically, cognitive insight could help them ship things efficiently, optimize their inventory levels, which would reduce kind of waste, reduces warehouse space or wasted kind of warehouse space, gets things to customers more quickly. And that kind of even allows them to do that anticipatory shipping, which we spoke about previously, and basically where an item is being sent to a hub near a customer before they actually buy it. So again, it just makes it more efficient. Amazon wants to get products from their warehouses to you as quickly as possible, and this cognitive insights can help drive that in terms of their supply chain management. So while like this isn't an exhaustive list, it's just a few ways basically that cognitive insight could be really transformative to a whole range of businesses. Like these are all quite different, and so hopefully there's something in here that applies to your product or applies to your business. And if not, as I said, it's not an exhaustive list. There are other ways. That it can be beneficial. Now, like with any, I suppose, promising technology, you do have challenges, you do have limitations to it, and I would say these limitations probably mean that it would be, I guess, probably ill-advised to rely on cognitive insight completely for your strategic decisions. Yeah, some of these challenges will explain why. I guess the first one you might have is unexpected events. So like if we revisit, say, the Thought Burgers order triaging example, right, where we're sending orders to the different restaurant branches, and we think, yeah, we're going to send this order to branch A. Branch A might still need the ability to manually kind of override the system to reject that order, because like what happens if like a customer or a member of staff had a medical emergency, or like there was a fire in the kitchen, or the water supply gets cut off, or the power gets cut off, or something like that, right? So those kind of unforeseen circumstances that the model won't have accounted for have to be considered. And global supply chain wise, that could be the breakout of a war or a pandemic or a ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal. All of these things have happened in the last few years, and they would all throw a model off. So unexpected events happen somewhat regularly, even though we can't predict them. So just be aware of that you can't be overly reliant on a system to do the work for you. You do need kind of manual overrides and that kind of thing. Then we've got the challenge of kind of transparency and accountability. Okay, and these two are kind of linked together. A lot of AI systems often kind of operate like a bit of a black box. So they kind of offer limited insight into how they work and how they arrive at certain decisions. But transparency into how those decisions were made is really, really crucial. It can be absolutely critical in terms of your team actually adopting the technology. We will be discussing that in a lot more detail in an upcoming session about adoption challenges. But yeah, letting your team know why decisions were made, letting them query those decisions, allow or even spot injustices, maybe, if the decision was actually wrong. It basically gives them a certain buy-in and lets them know that, yeah, we can actually be part of this. It's not just a top-down, this is the final decision and that's it, done. So it's really important kind of for your team morale. And the transparency is also essential to understanding who bears responsibility when AI systems make errors or when they cause harm, because those things can happen. So it basically, if you have good transparency, it means you can kind of take corrective actions, I guess. And again, if we just revisit our Thought Burgers example and we're talking about, the delivery triaging, so we're sending it out to different branches, it's now powered by cognitive insight. But let's say the algorithm makes an error, right? And it starts reducing the number of orders it's sending to a particular branch by 10% each week. Okay, so gradually that branch is getting fewer and fewer orders, and it's eventually forced to close. And it's forced to close before we even realize the error has been made. But by the time we do realize that, the jobs are gone, we've let down our customers in that area, we can't just reopen the restaurant. So who's culpable for that? Whose fault is that? If it was a person like a delivery manager that was choosing where the orders go, that's obviously a lot clearer. That mistake would be on them. That's their purview. But with an AI system, the responsibility and the kind of culpability can be a lot murkier. So it's a real challenge. Like accountability is a real challenge, but kind of transparency can kind of help you get there, so long as you have kind of the right things in place. Another one, which I'm sure probably most people would have heard of, is kind of bias and data quality. As I said, most people probably know at this stage that AI systems are trained on massive amounts of data, and embedded in that data, you have societal biases. And then these biases can become sort of ingrained in the AI algorithms, which can then sort of perpetuate a lot of unfair or discriminatory outcomes. So again, using Thought Burgers as an example, let's say one of our delivery drivers has religious commitments that make them unavailable to work on certain days, right? A branch manager would know that and would understand that. An unsupervised algorithm might not. And like penalizing the number of shifts that a driver is offered on religious grounds is a serious breach of ethics, and it's illegal in many countries. It's a protected characteristic. But an unsupervised algorithm might start doing that nonetheless. Might see, oh, this person's not around on a Saturday or Sunday, and therefore they're not reliable or whatever. It could make those calls. So you need to be aware of these kind of biases, because it could not only make your company or your business an exclusive place to work, but it could actually land you in a lot of legal hot water as well. So yeah, you want to make sure that bias and data, or the biases in the data don't creep in. And another big concern or a big challenge is kind of around privacy and security. So obviously the effectiveness of AI systems often hinges on having large volumes of personal data. So you need a lot of data to make these work well. This kind of raises concerns about what information is collected, how it's stored, where it's stored. That's especially relevant to GDPR kind of regulations in the UK and Europe. So that's something you really need to consider. You also then have different rules in different geographies or different countries. So keeping on top of all of that to make sure you're compliant everywhere is quite tricky and can be quite cost intensive. So yeah, there's definitely a challenge there around privacy. And another potential challenge here is that big companies tend to win big. So again, cognitive insights, to get the most from it, it's helpful when you've got an awful lot of data, and bigger companies tend to have larger amounts of data. So that can make the landscape for SMEs, for small and medium-sized enterprises, it can make it even tougher, basically, to compete with these big giants and to stay afloat in their market. So there are definitely challenges here to taking cognitive insight and trying to bring it into your product or business. There are steps you can take to kind of combat some of these, and I mentioned kind of a couple of them in passing there. But the first thing is it's critical basically to regularly ensure that your models are operating efficiently and that they're operating as expected. So an algorithm is not a one and done. Okay. They require constant maintenance, testing, supervision after you've built them, to make sure that those harmful biases haven't crept in, that logical decisions are still being made, that a branch isn't getting 10% fewer orders week on week for some unexplained reason. Okay. So you need to regularly test them, make sure that they're still operating. Incorporating then explainable AI to kind of help check a model's fairness and accuracy and potential bias, that's extremely beneficial. It just makes the decisions more transparent, basically, kind of I guess bridges the gap between complex algorithm making a decision and kind of human comprehension. So you're kind of trying to make it a little bit easier for us humans to understand, and that's a big step in the right direction. Sharing the model's training data can be another good move in that kind of same vein. In case decisions basically lead to damaging results, as we mentioned with the top burgers, with the branches closing, accountability guidelines should also be considered at organizational level, especially if you're kind of a larger organization. So who bears responsibility if the system or for the system and for the decisions it's making, who's reviewing them, who does the book stop with, who's responsible if things go wrong. So that having some of those clear guidelines in place that people know, okay, this is my job, it's up to me to do this, it's not just pawned off to an algorithm. That can be really important. In terms of the kind of data collection, it's really nice if you give customers the option to opt out of their data being used to train models. And you see this on some apps nowadays. Like as a designer, I use Figma a lot, and they give that option, which I think is nice. But we looked previously at some cases where it's not given as an option, like WhatsApp and Gemini. From Google, it's just kind of being forced on users, and that can create a lot of sort of backlash and negative image for the brand. So you want to avoid that. So give that option if you can. And in some cases, you might actually have to give that option as well, and depending on the geography or the country that you're trying to operate in. You probably might also need to consider investing in robust sort of safeguards against data breaches and unauthorized access to sensitive information, because again, that sensitive information or that data is what makes these systems effective. So protecting that, or when you have a lot more data like that, trying to protect it might result in higher cybersecurity costs for businesses who are looking into kind of introducing cognitive insight. It's just basically something to keep in mind. Again, we'll touch on this later on in the series when we kind of look at some of the adoption challenges. But yeah, it's not without its drawbacks, I guess. And then finally, kind of supporting programs for SMEs or small and medium-sized businesses, and supporting open source projects as well could contribute to kind of a more competitive landscape, where small businesses maybe have a better chance to survive against the big giants who have all the data and have all of that stuff in place. That's probably more of a moral choice, I guess, but it's something worth considering if that's important to your business. So in summary, for this week, cognitive insight is basically an incredibly powerful and beneficial application of AI, right? You can do an awful lot with it, and it can really, really help out your business. But it's important not to just kind of lob it into your processes and see what it can do, and be strategic about where you're bringing it in. So again, follow that process that we talked about in our second stream in this series. You want to focus on the problem, you want to identify the goal, you want to identify your success metrics, and then everything else from then on is rooted in adding value to the customer. So you're kind of anchoring it in that. So always follow that process with cognitive insight, with cognitive engagement, with automation, with any new tool you're bringing in. Really, that's the process you want to follow. And if cognitive insight helps you to get to that goal, then that's fine. That's great. It's a good thing to bring in. But always remember as well that while it can bring major benefits to you and like to your strategic decision making, it should be used as an aid to strategic decision making, but it shouldn't actually replace it. And again, we saw some of the limitations as to why we should avoid making decisions solely based on algorithms like that. So really good tool. Again, we've used that phrase before. It's a really good tool. It's a really good teammate even, but you don't want to become completely reliant on it totally. And yeah, as you said, these AI systems, they have their challenges, they have their limitations, and you need to consider that before diving in. So don't just launch in and then kind of find yourself in either legal hot water or, you know, with massive cybersecurity costs or whatever it might be. Think about these things before you jump in. Because yeah, you need to basically identify the best ways for your organization or your product to kind of mitigate against those challenges. So that is all we've got for this week. As I said, it was a little bit over time. I hope it didn't take up too much of your day. If you've missed any of the other streams, feel free to check those out on YouTube. They will be all linked together in a playlist, and it probably makes more sense when you're kind of seeing them all together. Hope this is valuable. Next week, we'll be looking at cognitive engagement. So the third of our kind of 3 use cases for AI. So yeah, we'll see you then again, same time next week. Thanks everyone for joining, and talk to you then.